Hi everyone, welcome back to Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Today's video is 4 reviews for you from the Women's Prize for Fiction Longlist. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name's Alice and I have way too many books. And if you've been watching lately, you will know that I am hosting a Women's Prize for Fiction Plodalong, along with the lovely Gemma from Gemma Books and Charlie from Charlie Book Reads. And we are aiming between us to try and read the long list of the Women's Prize for Fiction before the shortlist comes out, or just before the end of the prize season. And so far I have read 5 of the books. And I won't be reviewing one of them here because I'm reviewing it elsewhere in a video you may have already seen for the BookTube prize, and that's Glory by NoViolet Bulawayo. So I'm not talking about that one today, but I do have 4 books I want to talk about, and they are the first 4 that I've read specifically for this. So the 4 books are going to be The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, and the 2 audiobooks that I have read so far, which are Fire Rush by Jacqueline Crooks and I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. For me, I think that although these audiobooks are both incredibly different, they are both books that worked really, really well as audiobooks, and they're both books that I would class as, in my mind, as very good books, but they are not books that I gave 5 stars to. So we'll start with them. We'll start with I'm a Fan because probably out of the 4, it's my least favourite so far, but that is not to say it's not a good book because I did really enjoy it. So what have I got to say about I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel? I think that this is going to be a book that is going to divide people. I think people are going to really, really love it or really, really dislike it. And I think I've spoken to both people already. My thoughts on I'm a Fan were, I thought it was really, really well narrated as an audiobook, and the audiobook I had was actually narrated by the author, which I thought was interesting, and also it perfectly matched the narrative voice for me. Now, one problem that I know a lot of people are having with I'm a Fan is that the narrator is very unlikable, and I think that this is done on purpose. This is very much a novel about obsession and about social media, and obsession with social media in particular. So I actually think that this book had a lot of really interesting things to say. Let's start with the things I didn't particularly enjoy about I'm a Fan. This was a book that was a bit too explicit for me. I'm not saying that I particularly mind books being explicit, but I don't really enjoy like explicit for the sake of explicit, which I definitely think this probably was. I didn't really enjoy the bits about sexual activities, but yeah. I also did feel that the narrator was very, very unkind to herself. Didn't really treat herself with any kindness, and she also didn't really treat others very well, especially her boyfriend. So this is a very short audio and a very short book, and I wouldn't want to spoil it for anyone. So these are all spoiler-free reviews, by the way. So what I really did like about I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel is that it has a lot to say about social media. And I thought what it said about social media was said really, really well and was really, really accurate. I think social media is something that does take over people's lives and can lead to obsession. So you can see where the author and also the nameless narrator are coming from on that subject. I also thought that there was a lot of good social commentary outside of being about social media, commentary around race, around being a woman, that I found really, really interesting. And this is sort of told in vignettes from what I could tell from the audiobook. I don't know how it looks laid out on a page because I haven't seen the book physically, but it worked well as an audiobook, and it came across as like these short blasts about different things, about whatever was in the narrator's head at the time. And I liked it. I thought it worked well as a book. I thought it was very, very interesting, and I enjoyed what it had to say, particularly on those topics of race, being a woman, and social media. So I think this is a really, really good read. It had its uncomfortable moments for me, but I think a lot of people will absolutely love this. So a good start for this review video. And secondly, I'm going to talk about Fire Rush. Fire Rush by Jacqueline Crooks is a book about music and a book about the main character, Gemma, who is living in the late 70s and early 80s. In the first part of the book, she lives in a town outside London. There's a second part of the book in Bristol, and there's a third part of the book in Jamaica. And she lives in a Jamaican English community, and I thought that this worked really, really well as an audiobook, and it started really, really strongly. The narrator's voice for this, and I've forgotten to look up the narrator's name, but I will list it on the screen if possible, because she perfectly matched Gemma's narrative voice for me, and that's always something I really, really like in an audiobook. I also think that I might have struggled more to read the physical version of this book because there is quite a lot of different language, and I do enjoy different language. There was a lot of what I think is probably London slang and like Jamaican slang as well. So Gemma definitely has a very distinctive voice, and there is sort of dialect in this book, and I don't know how that would have come across to me on the page, whether it would have been easier to understand or more difficult. I didn't have any problem understanding it in the context of the narrator reading it to me. I thought she read it perfectly. And I also really, really liked how she got across the rhythm of the text, because rhythm is like the central important concept to this book. The rhythm and the vibe of the book really came across in little snatches of music. Sometimes there was singing, and it was, I just thought it was a really well-made audiobook that reflected the rhythm of the book. I still, 2 weeks later, don't really know fully how I feel about Fire Rush, so I'd love to discuss it with you if you've also read it. I feel like this is a very, very good book, an excellent debut, and the author obviously knows her stuff. You can tell that these are things that she has experienced for some of the things. So I loved part one. In part one, I really thought this was going to be a 5-star book. I did feel that part two was a bit weaker, and part three is actually very short. And there were certain things in the narrative that I found difficult, and I also found at times I found the pacing was a little bit slow in the middle, and the middle part was more filled up with characters that there are reasons not to like, whereas in the earlier part I really, really liked all of the characters. So mixed feelings on this one from me. It's a book that I keep thinking really, really fondly on, but I was very unsure about the ending, which I won't mention what happens. But I did really, really enjoy what I felt I learnt about music and the late 70s and 80s and dubstep, which was a huge, huge part of Gemma's life. I think one of the best things about Fire Rush is that Gemma is such an interesting character, and following her on this journey was really, really interesting. She has a lot going on in her life. There's a lot of difficult issues here. She's been living with her distant father, and her friends have different issues. There is a lot of tragedy in this book, and there's a lot of difficult things to read about, but I thought it was really well done, particularly the grief. Yeah, without spoiling it, I don't want to say any more, but I would love to hear from you if you've read it, to discuss it with me, because I still couldn't tell you a completely coherent opinion of Fire Rush, unfortunately. So, on to the two physical books I read. The next one is The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell, and I think this was the first one I finished, either that or Fire Rush, and I really, really like Maggie O'Farrell. I love her writing style. I found this one a bit slower to get going, but I really, really enjoyed it. So this is set in sort of Renaissance Italy, and it's about Lucrezia, who is 16 years old and has been married out of her family to a man who she believes is going to kill her. And this is based on a true person in history who did die quite young, and yeah, Maggie O'Farrell has used her imagination and imagined Lucrezia's story. The inspiration for this comes from a poem by Robert Browning called My Last Duchess, which I read for GCSE, I believe, and I thought that this was a really well-inspired book. The marriage portrait kind of has two timelines. So we have the present day where Lucrezia is living with her new husband and is scared for her life, and we have her past. We hear about her childhood and everything that has led up to where she is now. I do feel that the pace was quite slow in this book, but the sort of mystery of what is going to happen to Lucrezia just drove me on to read this. I actually probably enjoyed her childhood parts more, but I just think Maggie O'Farrell is such a skilled writer. This was a really excellent book to read. It's very, very hard with Maggie O'Farrell not to compare a book to Hamnet, even though I only read Hamnet last year. I personally enjoyed Hamnet more, although I say enjoyed, they're both tough books to read. This probably less so, but I just thought Hamlet was so wonderful that it was going to be really hard for this to live up to it. And this was probably about people that I was slightly less interested in than the characters in Hamlet, but it is a brilliant story. It's so well told, and I can definitely see why this one is on the Women's Prize for Fiction list, and I would be hugely surprised if this doesn't make it to the shortlist. With I'm a Fan and Fire Rush, I'm not sure about the shortlist. I would probably think that Fire Rush might edge it to the shortlist over I'm a Fan, but I'm a Fan has had a lot of really popular reviews as well, so not sure. I think lovers of historical fiction, which I traditionally am not, but I'm getting more into it, will really, really love this. I think it will be popular with people who like historical fiction. And if you like Maggie O'Farrell, I think you will like this book. So yeah, that's book number 3. And book number 4, I would give that probably a 4, maybe 4.5 stars. Probably 4.5 stars, but I just didn't get that tiny little bit extra that would have pushed it to a 5-star for me. So the final book I want to talk about is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, and I absolutely loved this book. Absolutely 5 stars. I would actually give this more than 5 stars if more than 5 stars were available. I just am absolutely in awe of Barbara Kingsolver. This is my first book by her, and it was just incredible. I couldn't stop reading this, and I loved it so much. So that's not really a helpful review, but Team Copperhead all the way. I think that this should win of what I've read so far, obviously. Maybe there's another 5-star lurking in there, but yes. So this is Barbara Kingsolver's sort of reimagining, certainly has parallels with Dickens' David Copperfield. And I have read David Copperfield, and I have read it enough years ago that I had forgotten quite a few details. So there's been a lot of debate on BookTube about whether it's better to have read David Copperfield or not. I think people who haven't read David Copperfield, this will just be an amazing story that you will love. It's a first-person narrative from the point of view of our main character, Demon, and it's such a good first-person narrative voice. Now, if you have read Dickens and you have read David Copperfield but not recently, I think you will really enjoy this as well. I felt like a lot of things were popping up in my head that I was thinking, oh, I remember a bit there, sort of thing. But it's in such a different setting, and I felt this was significantly different from David Copperfield as well. But I really, really enjoyed all the references back to David Copperfield. They felt like little Dickensian Easter eggs to me. I've heard people disagree who have read David Copperfield, but for me, I loved it. I loved it so much. Sometimes I wanted to look up details of David Copperfield, but didn't because I didn't want to spoil it. And this is a really, really hard-hitting book. There are so many terrible things happening to Demon in his life. It basically follows him from birth, and he is living in Southern America, in Virginia, I believe, in like a small town, and he is growing up in a very impoverished life, and it's very, very hard not to spoiler this because so many things happen to Demon along the way. This really, really hit hard about the foster system, and this is set in the opioid crisis in America, and that is a really big part of this too. I actually felt that having read David Copperfield, I had more of a sense of foreboding with some characters. I'd be like, oh no, don't do that, Demon. And you do say that in this, and I did say that in David Copperfield as well. You really do feel for this character, this boy, and you really do want things to work out well for him. And trauma keeps happening to him. So I thought this was wonderful. I don't think there was actually anything I dislike about this. It's 100% a 5-star book for me. It's only been a couple of days since I finished reading it, but I've been thinking about it so much, and the whole time I was reading it, if I had put it down, I was thinking about Demon and what was going to happen to him next. And yeah, I don't think I've given the best summary of this because all I can think to say is how much I love it. I think that you will really, really like this if you like Barbara Kingsolver, although I haven't read her other books. My mum has read quite a few of her other books and said that this was a good one. Definitely, it's made me want to read more Kingsolver. I think she's such a clever author. I loved the writing style in this. You know, there's description of the area where Demon lives. There's a bit of everything in this, and if you are a Dickens fan, I genuinely think that I'm hugely surprised that any Dickens fan would not like this because of the influences of David Copperfield. My mum has read all of Dickens and she loved this so much as well. So yeah, that is Demon Copperhead in as short a space of time as I can review it. And I loved it. I'm going to go out and buy myself a copy of this, but I may wait till paperback. I may have to get myself a copy of David Copperfield as well. And just brilliant, just a fantastic book. I hope it wins this prize. I definitely think it deserves a place on the shortlist, regardless of the rest of the ones I read. This is wonderful. So yeah, if you're thinking about picking up Demon Copperhead and you're not sure because you haven't read David Copperfield, definitely read it. If you're not sure because you have read David Copperfield, I would say 100% give this a try because it's in such a different location and with such different things going on that it is significantly different enough for me. I'd love to hear from you if you've read Demon Copperhead or any of these 4 books. Those were my first 4 reviews of the Women's Prize this year. Hopefully there will be more to come. I'm currently reading 2 of the books in physical copy, Pod by Layleen Paul and Children of Paradise by Camilla Gradova. I'm currently listening to Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes, so that is where I am at the moment. Once I've finished those 3, I will be halfway on the long list. If you're joining in the Plodalong, let me know what you've read in the comments down below, and let me know if you enjoyed this review. If you did, please do give it a like. Please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. And yeah, let me know your experiences with the long list so far. And I'll hope to see you all again soon for another video all about books here on Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Bye for now.